During lunch with my in-laws, I got a text from an unknown number. Don't react. They're recording you. The sound of cutlery clinking against plates drowned out any chance of real conversation. My mother-in-law was smiling way too much. My brother-in-law avoided eye contact. And my husband, he just ate like it was the most ordinary lunch in the world until my phone buzzed silently on my lap. Unknown number. The message was short and it froze me. Don't react. They're recording you. I swallowed hard and kept smiling. But my mind was spinning. They were filming me. But why? And what were they trying to catch? I wasn't a criminal. I was just Clara, a wife, a history teacher, a woman who never raised her voice in that house. Even after hearing the worst passive-aggressive jabs, something told me this wasn't just about a video. That hidden camera was only the beginning of what they had planned for me. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, had always looked at me with disdain. She never forgave me for not coming from a decent family, as she put it. I've had to sit in silence while she said in front of everyone, some people only marry to escape their own lives. I smiled and poured more wine that night, but inside I crumbled. I knew her prejudice was coated in fake smiles and that my husband always stayed silent. Before we go on, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a free way to support my work. That message during lunch was my warning. Someone in that house was trying to protect me, or maybe testing me. I kept eating in silence, scanning the room with my eyes. A picture frame slightly out of place, a wall socket with a crooked cover, a new object on the shelf. I could swear there was a hidden camera. If so, what were they hoping to capture? An outburst? A phrase they could use against me? My name is Clara and I'm 34. I'm a history teacher trained to read gestures, silences, subtext. And in that moment, my instincts screamed. I was being manipulated or set up for something bigger. Maybe a legal trap, a false accusation, or just another attempt by my mother-in-law to erase me from that family for good. But right then, I did what I do best. I watched and I prepared in silence. If they were filming me, I had to give them the exact opposite of what they wanted, and I had to start filming too. The game had changed. This wasn't just a family lunch anymore. It was the start of a siege, and I wouldn't be caught off guard. But before anything else, I needed to know who sent that message and why now, after everything I had already swallowed in silence. I'll admit, part of me felt relief, because if someone warned me, then maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe someone in that house had a conscience or was scared of how far this could go. What had they already recorded? And what were they planning to do with the footage? I started mentally, listing every humiliation I had endured. And something new began to stir inside me. Revenge. I, after would have not a visitation, wouldn't leave looking like the crazy one, the unstable one, the ungrateful one. Not this time. If they wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules, but on my terms. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what I'd find the next day. When I walked into my husband's office and saw with my own eyes where the footage was being stored, that's when I started to understand. They'd been recording me for weeks, and the reason why was far, far worse than I imagined. That night, I waited for my husband to fall asleep. He snored with the peace of someone who either carries no secrets or has carried them for so long they no longer feel heavy. I tiptoed to the office and opened the door slowly, careful not to make a sound. The computer was still on. On the screen, a folder named Project C blinked like a warning, and I knew I wasn't imagining things. They were watching me. I opened the folder with shaking hands. There were dozens of files, videos labeled with dates, times, and to my horror, room codes. Kitchen 0713. Move. Bathroom 0625. Move. Bedroom 0705. Move. My stomach turned. They had recordings of me in the most private moments of my home, in the bathroom, the bedroom, during arguments I thought were between just me and him, or worse, me and my child. I tried to stay calm as I opened one of the videos. There I was sitting in the living room talking to my therapist on the phone. I don't know how much longer I can stay in this house. I feel like I'm being watched. The irony made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. They had it all. My breakdowns, my weaknesses, my pain. archived like I was a clinical case, or a threat. With every click, my rage grew. They weren't just filming me, they were collecting ammo against me and worse, editing the videos, cutting parts, rearranging my words. I noticed it because I knew my clothes. A shirt I wore only after that conversation showed up in an earlier clip. They were fabricating a narrative. But why? What were they trying to prove? That I was unstable. I went back upstairs without making a sound. But something in me had changed. I was hurt. Yes. Humiliated. Yes. But I was also determined. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. It was a crime, an assault on my privacy, and I wouldn't be the eternal victim. I had to protect myself, get ahead of them. If they were recording, I'd record too, but not in secret. In a way that left no doubt. The next day, I bought an external hard drive and transferred everything. Made backups, set passwords, created a new email no one knew about, and sent the files to myself. Then I went to the school where I worked and requested a medical leave for acute stress. The principal tried to hide his surprise but approved it. I needed time, silence, and a plan. Because now revenge wasn't just an idea. It was a path. I spent the next few days in a public library, far from their eyes, going through every video, one by one, matching dates, timestamps, conversations, until I found what I feared most. A recording of my son in his room talking to his grandmother. She said, word for word, soon your mommy's going to leave, and the house will be yours. My blood ran cold. They were using my son against me, turning his childhood into a weapon. That was when pain turned into steel. Humiliation became fuel. They wanted me out of that house. Maybe declared unfit. Maybe even accused of parental alienation. But I wouldn't wait to be defeated. If they wanted to destroy my image, I'd show the truth, their truth. And the next day, I visited a law firm that specialized in surveillance and emotional abuse. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a legitimate case of privacy violation, and I was going to press charges one by one with no warning. I filed the first documents with the help of a lawyer who, after watching the videos, just said they dug their own grave. We started the legal process in secret. I requested a forensic review of the footage, filed for a protection order to keep my son from being used against me, and authorized an investigation into all hidden cameras. The most ironic part, those videos would be used, but to incriminate them, something was still missing. Exposure. I needed to rip off every mask. And for that, I needed the perfect setting. A place where everyone would be present, where no one could escape the truth. That's how I decided to throw a birthday dinner for myself. Only this time, the gift would be for them. A box with a screen and everything. They stole from me. But before that, something happened that almost ruined everything. A note, left inside my son's backpack, completely shifted the course of my plan. I found the folded note between his notebooks. It was handwritten in cursive, unsigned. It simply read, "You need to leave. They're going to use the boy." My whole body froze. This wasn't speculation. It was a direct warning. Someone on the inside knew more than they were letting on. And the only thing keeping me there now was my need for justice. I held the note for minutes, shaking. I started replaying every conversation, every recent behavior. I remembered something my mother-in-law said days earlier. Lucas has been so quiet, like he knows something he shouldn't. At the time, I thought it was just another jab. But now, it made sense. They were trying to turn my son against me, as if I were a problem to be removed, as if I were disposable. Walking to his room, my heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. I sat next to his bed and gently asked, "Sweetheart, has anyone been saying strange things about Mommy?" He hesitated, looked at the door like he was afraid someone might hear, then whispered, "Grandma said you want to take me away and never come back." My breath caught. This was worse than I imagined. I told him none of that was true, that I would never hurt him, that no one had the right to lie like that. But I saw the fear in his eyes and the doubt. They were succeeding, slowly erasing me from his memory, using childhood's fragility as a weapon, and that I would never forgive. What started as a silent revenge now had a new purpose, protect my son. The next day, I made a drastic decision. I took the note to my lawyer and asked her to include an emergency clause, request the court to temporarily suspend my mother-in-law's contact with the boy based on signs of emotional manipulation. She agreed. If the judge approves, you'll have more freedom to act, she said. And that's what I did. I waited in silence as the court reviewed the request. At home, the tension grew. My husband seemed on edge, started coming home early, rummaging through drawers when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, he tried to access my computer. I saw it in the window's reflection. He knew something was coming, but had no clue it was already underway. I was playing their game, but with my own rules, and they didn't suspect a thing. On Friday, I received the court order. My mother-in-law's contact with my son was suspended indefinitely. I smiled in silence, not out of spite, but out of relief. For the first time, I was protecting what I loved most. No matter how much they lied, manipulated, or betrayed me, I was going to fight, and I would win. A part of me was reborn that day, and with it, a coldness I didn't know I had. The next night, my mother-in-law showed up at my door, screaming, "What did you do, you ungrateful brat?" She yelled like a lunatic from the sidewalk. My son heard her and ran to the backyard. I simply closed the door. I knew her desperation was only the beginning, but what she'd do next completely caught me off guard, and for a moment almost made me question my own sanity. The next morning, I found my car scratched all over. Words like crazy, monster, bad, and mom were painted on the doors in white paint. My son saw it before I did. He stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the slurs as if trying to make sense of them. I knelt beside him and said, "Someone really sad must have done that." But inside, I was boiling. I knew exactly who it was. Just another cheap shot to shake me. I called the police and filed a report. They took photos, asked questions, but made it clear. Without outdoor cameras on the street, it would be hard to prove. I stayed quiet. I knew she was counting on that on impunity. But what my mother-in-law didn't know was that I had installed a micro camera pointing straight at the garage entrance. And that night, she herself, wearing a black coat, left her signature on my gate. My lawyer watched the footage and said just one sentence. "Now we've got everything." We attached the video to the case, requesting a restraining order to keep her away from me and the house. It was my first real legal win, but emotionally, I was drained. My son cried at night asking if Grandma hated him. I said no. I lied, to protect a little heart that didn't yet understand betrayal. On Sunday during lunch, my husband slammed his utensils down and said, "You're tearing my family apart." I didn't look up, just kept eating. Inside, I felt a knot. He was showing whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine, but I already knew. His silence in the face of abuse had always been too loud, and now he was bothered because for once I wasn't passive anymore. That same afternoon, he tried to stop me from leaving the house, said I was turning the boy against his grandma, and that it could be considered alienation. I almost laughed. He, who allowed me to be filmed in secret, was now concerned about our son's emotional well-being. I showed him the court order, the restraining measure. He ripped it to shreds, but I had copies and witnesses. The final straw came that night. I found my son crying in the bathroom, saying his dad told him, "Mommy might be taken away if she doesn't get better soon." I sat on the floor and held him. For hours. That was it. They were even using the fear of abandonment as a weapon. I couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out, not just in court, but in front of everyone. It was time to turn on the lights in that darkness. I went back to the birthday dinner plan. Resent the invitations to the whole family. Told them I wanted a moment of reconciliation. Everyone confirmed. Hypocrites, smiling in texts and calls while about to swallow their own poison. I rented a quiet venue, set up a projector, and prepared the videos. Every single one. No edits, no cuts, no manipulation. During the week of the dinner, my husband started acting strange, glued to his phone, whispering into calls until one evening, I found a paper in his jacket pocket. It was a quote from a lawyer specializing in full custody battles. He was going to try to take my son. But, before he could make a move, something unexpected happened. His sister asked to meet with me alone. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. She was the only one in that family who never got involved in anything, neutral, almost absent. But that day, her face was serious. She sat across from me, took a deep breath, and said, "Clara, I can't keep this in anymore." I said nothing. She was trembling with guilt in her eyes. She went on, "They've been planning this since last year. The cameras, the videos, everything." My body turned cold. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a printed email. I recognized the sender. Immediately, my mother-in-law. The message was a forward titled "Plan for if Clara snaps." Attached were instructions for installing hidden cameras, suggested dates and phrases to be used to provoke me, like "You're not okay," "Forgetting things again," and "Do you need help?" She told me she didn't agree with any of it, but she was afraid of being cut off from the family, of losing the financial help she got from her mother. But now, seeing how far they were going, dragging a child into this, trying to manipulate the court, she decided to walk away. And, more than that, she handed everything over to me. "Do whatever you want with it," she said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Just keep me out of it." I took the flash drive with shaking hands. The rage I felt was unlike anything before, colder, heavier. The pain wasn't just emotional anymore. It was a turning point. I now had direct proof of the plan, detailed, premeditated, legally admissible. My plan for silent revenge had just evolved into something bigger. Now I could expose not just the actions, but the intention. I brought everything to my lawyer. She read the email in silence for a long time, then looked at me and said, "You've got a case for defamation, illegal surveillance, emotional abuse, and attempted judicial fraud." It was more than I expected. She drafted a new motion based on the evidence. The judge approved it in less than 72 hours. From that moment, legally, neither my husband nor my mother-in-law could come near me or our son. Even so, I went ahead with the dinner. I made sure to keep the invitation, kept smiling, pretended everything was fine. They thought they'd corner me with one last move, but I was the one directing the script. I hired a tech to run the projector, had the videos ready to go, set up the chairs, put flowers on the tables, soft music playing, a peaceful vibe, all an illusion. The morning of the dinner, I got an anonymous message. "Don't trust anyone. Today, not even the ones who smile." For a moment, I hesitated. Were they planning something else? A last-minute twist? But I was ready. Nothing they said or did could change what was coming. They wanted family drama, wanted to play dirty. Then they were about to taste the bitter flavor of their own cruelty. They all showed up with rehearsed smiles, hugged me, called me strong, asked how I was. My mother-in-law even brought flowers. But when the lights went out and the projector came on, silence hit the room like a heavy curtain. And what showed on the screen made my mother-in-law scream. But the worst was yet to come because someone was about to stand up for her. And it would be the last time. The room darkened, and the video began with the gentlest image possible. Me reading a story to my son. Then the screen flickered, and an audio recording played. It was my mother-in-law's voice. "She'll destroy herself. We just need to give her a little push." Some people chuckled, unaware of the context. Others looked around, visibly uncomfortable. Then came the blow. Side-by-side footage, the edited videos, versus the originals. The montage clearly showed the manipulations. One video showed my supposed meltdown late at night. Next to it, the original revealed I was simply crying quietly, reading a farewell letter from my late father. The distortions were grotesque. Faces in the room. It began to shift. The silence was broken by a harsh thud. My mother-in-law's hand slamming the table. "You set all this up." That's when her husband stood up for the first time. He raised his voice. "You set it up, Agnes. Not her." Everyone turned toward him. "I bought the first camera, but I never knew you were manipulating the child. You've gone too far." My mother-in-law gasped. She looked around as if searching for an exit, an ally, a lifeline. But everyone was watching now, and no one moved. My husband tried to cut the projector. He got up and rushed to the tech booth. But the technician I hired was already ready. "There's one more part," he said, glancing at me, and I gave the nod. The next clip was the one where my husband told his lawyer, "I'll push her until she loses custody. Then we'll get the house and the kid." A woman from his family started crying. An uncle stood up and walked out. My son wasn't there. Thank God. He spent the weekend at a friend's house as part of my plan. I didn't want him to see any of this. Not yet, but it had to be done. This was my revenge. Real, cold, painful. It was the moment where each of them would have to look into their own reflection. I didn't want applause. I wanted justice. And, in that room, I finally felt it. At the end, no one could look me in the eye. Some apologized, others left in silence. My mother-in-law sat frozen. Her husband stepped away from her. My husband just stared at me like he couldn't believe he'd lost. He muttered, "You ruined everything." And I replied, "I just took off your masks. The rest you did all by yourselves." I stood up, walked out, and left them all to sink. In the car, I took a deep breath. My heart was still racing, but not from fear, from relief. My phone buzzed. A new court notification. The judge had approved the request for full temporary custody with a complete no-contact order until the next hearing. The words on the screen felt like a hug. I had won, but something was still missing. Something no one in that room expected, not even me. I got home, took off my shoes, and dropped onto the couch. But when I turned on the light, I saw a white envelope sitting on the table. No name, no return address. Inside there was only one photo of me asleep, and on the backhand written, "You still don't know what I'm capable of." I held the photo with trembling hands. It was recent. My hair, the sheets, even the book fallen beside me. It all matched the night before. Someone had been inside my house. While I slept, after everything I'd exposed, after all the court orders, someone still got through my door. The fear sank in slowly, like poison. I wasn't safe. I never had been. I looked around. The windows were locked. So was the front door. But what about the back? The spare keys my mother-in-law used to have, or worse, did my own husband still have secret access? I rushed to check every lock, every crack. It was like reliving the trauma of the hidden cameras. But now the threat was physical. I was sleeping, under the same roof where monsters still roamed free. I called my lawyer immediately. She was blunt. "Don't panic. Put the photo in a plastic bag and take it to the police first thing tomorrow." That's exactly what I did. The next day, I filed a report for trespassing and stalking. The police came to my house, asked questions, examined the envelope, but deep down I knew it would be hard to find the person if they were already this close. I spent the next few nights sleeping with the lights on, a kitchen knife hidden under my pillow. Any sound made me sit upright. I was on the verge of a breakdown. And that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted me unstable, enough to give up, to walk away from my own freedom. But if there's one thing I learned from this war, it's that desperation isn't weakness. It's fuel. My lawyer filed a new request. A full perimeter restriction. House, street, surrounding areas. And this time, the judge didn't hold back. A security order with electronic monitoring was granted. If anyone got close, I'd get an AB4 alert. But even then, it didn't bring peace. Because the real violence wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional. And they knew how to play that game. With the case ongoing, my husband started playing the victim. Told his family I'd kicked him out unfairly. Posted old pictures with our son. Adding captions like, "Absent father." Thanks to alienation, he gained support from people who had no idea what he'd done. I got attacked online, called cruel, unstable, opportunistic. The pain came back, but this time I had armor. I created an anonymous account, and I started posting the videos one by one with dates, context, short captions, no personal attacks, just facts. And what started with 10 views turned into 10,000, then 1 100,000. In just a few days, local news outlets began reporting on the case as an Allery example of psychological abuse and family manipulation. I got messages of support from other women, from mothers, from sons, and my voice started to grow. But one quiet night, I got a phone call that made my blood freeze. The number was unknown. The voice on the other end was low, metallic, disguised. "You're exposing too much and we're not the only ones watching." Now, the line went dead, and in that moment, I realized my revenge was working. But maybe I had awakened someone even worse than I imagined. I stood there holding the phone, staring at nothing. That voice wasn't my mother-in-law's or my husband's. It was something else, colder, more distant, like someone watching from the outside and getting irritated. I started wondering, who else might have something to lose? Who else would want to silence me or bury this story? And then it hit me. Maybe this went deeper than I thought. That week, my most shared video was the one of my husband talking to his lawyer, plotting to take my son and the house. The fallout exploded. A TikTok creator covered my story, and soon after, I got a message from a woman saying, "He did something similar to me years ago, but no one believed me." That lit a spark. Had my husband tried this before? I asked my lawyer to look into his public records. We found out he'd been named in a similar custody dispute, but the case never moved forward. The woman had dropped it, maybe out of fear, maybe out of exhaustion. I tried contacting her, and, to my surprise, she responded. We arranged to meet, and what she told me made my stomach turn. The tactics were identical. The pattern was obvious. She'd been recorded too. Discredited. Isolated. But in her case, he had help. A family friend. Someone influential who helped cover it. All up. That man's name, an old acquaintance, the partner at the law firm where my husband worked. Now it all made sense. He wasn't acting alone. There was a network, a web, a system, built around him that protected and silenced women. I got home with sweaty palms, started combing through the divorce papers, the clauses, the contracts, and there it was, the partner's name on several documents. He wasn't just a bystander. He was part of the machinery. Worse, he controlled most of my husband's assets. If I wanted to cut off the serpent's head, I'd have to go beyond the family. I'd have to hit where it hurts most, money and reputation. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. The other victim gave me permission to attach her account to my case with documents, screenshots, even old recordings. With everything in hand, I asked my lawyer to contact the Bar Association. If everything went right, that partner would lose his license, and my husband would lose his job. That would be their first fall. But there was still one last part of the plan, the public one, the final one. The company's charity event was scheduled. No, for Saturday. My ex-husband would be there, the partner too. Both were set to go on stage to talk about family values. I took a deep breath and decided that was it. That would be my final arena. And not with screaming, with documents, with images, with truth. They would give their speech, and I would show who they really were on a giant screen in front of everyone. The day before the event, I got a new delivery, an envelope. No threats, no words, just a signed copy of the sale contract for the house I was living in another woman's name, dated 2 days earlier. I just stood there staring at the contract. The house was now under another woman's name, someone named Megan Lang. I had never heard of her, but what hurt the most was recognizing his signature. The man who shared my bed for years had sold our home behind my back before. We even knew the judge's final ruling. I was just an obstacle to be removed discreetly, a stone in the path of his fresh start. I woke up early on Saturday and got dressed calmly, simple clothes, hair tied back. I brought an envelope with me. Inside, copies of everything, the recordings, the contracts, the ex's screenshots, the partner's emails. This was my final move. The event hall was packed. Lawyers, business people, families with children. My ex-husband stepped onto the stage with the partner beside him. They talked about values, talked about unity, applauded their own hypocrisy. I waited until the end of the speech. Then I stood up, walked over to the AV technician, handed him the flash drive, and said, "Play this when I give the signal." I walked up, into the stage, unbothered, calm, almost disturbingly calm. I took the mic, took a breath, and said, "Sorry for the interruption, but I thought everyone here deserved to see the real legacy of these men." The room fell into absolute silence. The footage started playing. Videos, documents, evidence, all projected in high definition. My ex tried to run toward the tech booth, but security stopped him. The partner went pale, hiding his face with his hand. Some people left, others recorded on their phones. No one said a word for long minutes, just the sound of truth echoing through the walls. This was my revenge. Not with shouting, with facts, with courage, with justice. I left the stage without looking back. In the parking lot, my lawyer was waiting. "Congratulations. You did what no one else had the guts to do." The next day, both men were suspended from the firm. An official investigation was opened. The company lost sponsors. The house couldn't legally be transferred to that Megan woman because now there was a fraud. Complaint tied to the sale and full custody of my son was confirmed. I received invitations to share my story on TV shows. I declined every single one. My peace wasn't in fame. It was in silence. In watching my son sleep peacefully. In opening a window without fear. In no longer having to pretend everything was fine. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It's about rebuilding yourself from clean ruins and never returning to the place where they killed you inside. Months later, I found out my ex had moved away alone. The new woman left him after learning about the accusations. His mother was sued for harassment and ordered accusations to stay away, and the partner lost his license and his name. I saw a news article about him, working as a food delivery driver in another state. Ironic. They spent their lives trying to erase women like me, and in the end, they erased themselves. But that rainy night before bed, I got one last message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture of a house. The caption read, "You won. But you know this never really ends, right?" I stood there, staring at the screen, frozen. The address was real. It belonged to a recently built home in a remote neighborhood, according to a quick search. But what disturbed me most was the tone of the message. There were no insults, no rage, just a cold statement, a reminder that for people like them, losing doesn't mean backing off. It means finding a new way to strike. I showed the message to my lawyer. She advised me to update the police report and include it as a potential indirect threat. The police opened an investigation, but without clear identification. There wasn't much they could do. The number was a disposable burner, just another ghost in the shadows. I started avoiding going out at night, tightened security at my son's school, and for the first time, I considered leaving the city. But leaving would mean giving up everything I'd fought for. I had earned every inch of that home, every peaceful breath I now had at night. It felt unfair to run, because of fear. Still, something inside me couldn't settle. The message wasn't just about me. It was about control, about power, about saying, "I'm still here, even after your victory." That wasn't the end of a cycle. It was the beginning of another. One Saturday morning, I noticed a car, parked across the street. Dark, windows up, no visible plate. It stayed there for hours. On Sunday, it came back, and again on Monday. I called the police. They sent a patrol. But by the time they arrived, the car was gone. It was like someone was testing my limits, making me live, in constant alert. A new kind of torture, silent, legally slippery. I decided to install Hide, security cameras with remote monitoring, bought a new smart alarm system, and connected the Effectiveless house to a 24/7 central. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about emotional survival. Refusing to be another woman who wins on paper but lives in fear. My son asked me why the house now had so many buttons and codes. I told him it was just to protect us from the past. His school cooperated too. They created a system to keep any unauthorized person away. I didn't live in panic anymore. I stayed ahead. I acted. And even though it was exhausting, it made me stronger. I realized that even hurt Even alone, I was still dangerous to them because I knew too much. Hai chambe mui sao because I exposed them, because I won, and whoever speaks the truth becomes a permanent target for cowards. I started writing everything that happened in detail. I thought about turning my story into a book, but more than that, it was a way to document, to leave something for my son in case they ever tried to erase what happened. He'd know everything, not from the news, but from his mother through the eyes of someone who lived it and survived it. Every written line was a scar translated into words, a way to never be silenced again. On the last page I wrote, I added a note. Just 3 words. It's not over, because I could feel it. In the silence of the nights, the dropped calls, the deleted messages, someone was still lurking. And when I finally found the real name of the woman on the contract, I discovered something that made me freeze all over again. The name on the sale contract sounded too generic, Megan Lang. But something about it bothered me. I started searching public records, social media, any trail, and I found it. A deactivated Instagram account with just one profile picture, a black and white photo, and even in low resolution. My heart raced. That woman wasn't a stranger. I had seen her before. I thought and thought until I remembered. She was a college friend of my ex-husband's. I remembered seeing her in a single, old photo taken in the basement of his mother's house in a graduation album. And the detail that froze me, she was sitting on his lap, not like a friend, like someone who had always been there, like someone who never left. The caption said, "My first home." Suddenly, it all made sense. Megan Lang wasn't new. She was from the past. I gathered everything and showed it to my attorney. She confirmed that Megan had been involved in an old identity fraud case in another state. She'd changed her name years ago. That explained why it was so hard to find her. She was the invisible piece of a chessboard already set before I even got married. The new girlfriend was actually a woman who had never accepted being left. Someone who waited and planned. My mother-in-law used to say, "Some people just don't know their place." Now I understand. Megan was probably always plan B. She had always been there. The house contract wasn't just about ownership. It was symbolic, a message. The victory they thought was already theirs. It made me question how much of my life had been controlled by hands I'd never seen. But now I saw, and that weakened them. I filed a motion to annul the sale based on fraud and a pre-existing relationship between the buyer and the seller. I submitted proof of their history and of Megan's involvement in attempts to emotionally destabilize me. The court agreed. The house went back under judicial review. Megan vanished. So did the number that sent the last threat. But instead of relief, I felt a silence I couldn't trust. It was like something was still lurking. My son started smiling again, sleeping better. I could cook calmly, listen to music, work, but always with that feeling that I needed to keep looking over my shoulder because people like them don't give up. They just retreat and observe, waiting for a slip-up, waiting for a crack, and I couldn't afford to be naive anymore. Not after everything I'd lost, not after everything I'd faced. The wound had healed, but the skin would never be the same. One day, I got a voicemail from a block number. 3 seconds, no words, just the sound of a child saying, "It's her." I knew that voice. It was my son. The recording came from some conversation, some private moment, as if they'd managed to capture something from inside my house. That broke me. I rushed to check every device, every camera. No signs of intrusion, but the recording was real. I brought it to the police. They said it might be fake, but I knew it was too personal. It was the final message. They still had access to something or someone. And that night before bed, I looked in the mirror and saw about it, faint blue light glowing from inside the lampshade. I walked to the lamp without breathing. The glow came from a tiny blue light barely visible. It was a micro camera hidden inside the metal frame aimed directly at my bed. My knees gave out. How? After everything. After the court orders, the security, the reports. Someone had still broken into my space again. Again, I called. The police immediately. They collected the device and, based on its model, traced the signals. Origin. The address was familiar. A rental apartment under the name Megan Lang, paid for by a company linked to my ex-husband's former partner. It was all there, twisted, dirty, and now, finally exposed. But this time I didn't want distance. I wanted prison. With all the evidence gathered, my attorney filed formal charges: stalking, violation of a court order, invasion of privacy, and endangerment of a minor. The judge didn't hesitate. A search warrant was issued. The police knocked on Megan's door in broad daylight. Inside the apartment they found more equipment, notes, even printed photos of me and my son. It was obsessive. It was sick. Megan was arrested. The ex-partner too. My ex-husband was indicted as an accomplice for covering up their actions. Even after the first complaints, the media exploded with the story. What started with a woman secretly filmed turned into a national scandal of stalking and legal manipulation. For the first time, I saw all three faces on the news, not as winners, but as criminals. And me, I went back to living. I moved to a new house, a smaller town, a new job. I picked a cul-de-sac, with elderly neighbors and flowers on every window. My son laughs often now. He's growing up, light-hearted. He knows the basics of what we went through. I never got another threat. Never saw another car parked out front. Never again had to sleep with a knife under my pillow. Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the exhausted woman who used to fear her own home. I see a survivor, a mother, a force, and if anyone ever tries to erase me again, I hope they know. I already went to war with my own family and came back with their heads on a platter. If this story gripped you, go watch the one on the left and hit the like button. It really helps me keep sharing emotional stories like this.